Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. In fact, I'm delighted and honored to be here and attend this conclave. So let me first compliment the organizers on having taken this initiative and organized an event on such an important topic. So I'm extremely sorry that I couldn't attend yesterday's sessions because of certain prior engagements. As you all know that we have made significant progress in terms of our pulses production in the last couple of years. And we achieved a record production of close to 23 million tons in 2016-17, and we are expected to achieve the same level of production in 2017-2018. So it's a very, very significant increase because we were struggling in terms of our production level in the range of 17 to 18 million tons, and moving from 18 million tons to 23 million tons is a very, very significant jump. And several factors have led to this increase in production. But I think it's also important to see the composition of basket in terms of what kind of pulses we are producing and how much we are producing. Because pulses is one of the segments where you would find there are still very strong preferences for a particular pulse crop. If I'm, from a particular region, my preference is for red gram. If I belong to a certain other region, maybe I would prefer chickpea or maybe lentil. So there has not been very strong substitution among these pulses, which used to be the case in case of edible oils maybe about 15, 20 years back. We used to know that this western region has preference for groundnut or cottonseed oil. Certain regions have preference for mustard oil. But in edible oils, you would find that there is a high degree of substitution, and price has become one of the most important determinant in terms of the composition of that basket of various oils which we consume. Today, you find a large number of brands coming up with the blended oils. So the point is that we need to look at these pulses not as a commodity group, but I think as an individual pulse, what is happening in terms of your red gram, what's happening in lentil, what's happening in your black gram, so and so forth. But you know that this sector faces a whole lot of constraints starting from production to the market. So the risks are pretty high on the production front because of a variety of reasons. And one of the prominent reason is that you know that we were almost surplus in pulses production in the 70s, and we became self-sufficient, and now we became deficit in production. And the so-called green revolution pushed these crops, pulses from better lands to the more marginal lands, from irrigated areas to unirrigated areas. And today, most of the pulses, by and large, are grown on marginal lands under rain-fed conditions. So that means they are prone to more risks, be it your sowing risk or maybe in the middle of your production cycle. The second important problem with this sector is which is also due to our, I think, research and development efforts. Today, availability of quality seed is one of the biggest constraints in pulses production. And our R&D system, typically, whether it's our National Agriculture Research System or our State Agriculture University system, their main focus has so far been on mostly the cereals, and that's true again in case of rice and wheat, because we were much more concerned about so-called food security, but now the things are changing because we are moving away from food security to nutrition security. So I think seed availability is another issue in case of your pulses. And as you know that these crops are also prone to more risks in terms of your insect pest attack or maybe disease attack. And unfortunately, these are the kind of crops which are typically known as poor man's crops. So even in terms of management practices, the management practices being adopted in pulses sector are also little bit neglected in the sense that if you are growing some high value crops like fruits, vegetables, or some other crops, so your involvement in production of those crops is much higher than what we usually see in pulses. Another issue with pulses is that you have a lower profitability and higher risk. And when I'm talking about risk, I'm talking about both the risk on the production side and on the market side compared to any of the competing crops. So as a farmer, I would like to reduce my risk because my appetite for risk is on the lower side. So I would really get into those crops where my risks are minimum. On the market side, you know that government has made significant impact in terms of one is increase in the support prices during last 4 to 5 years, and also in terms of getting into the procurement in a big way. But another issue which affects this sector is low productivity levels. If you look at last 10 years data, you would find there's not been very or major technological breakthrough which has really shifted the productivity curve to the higher frontier. Our productivity levels are still stagnating at a level of about 800 to 900 kilograms, less than 1 ton per hectare. And look at the top 5 producing states, starting with your Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh, Karnataka. And out of these 5 states, you'll find the productivity level of pulses is pretty on the lower side. In Rajasthan, it's about maybe about 550 to 600 kilograms per hectare. Maharashtra is again in the range of 650 kilograms per hectare. And Karnataka is again somewhere around 550 to 600 kilograms per hectare. So on one hand, you have lower productivity. On the second hand, you have a higher risk in terms of the market risk. So, you know, that creates a kind of a problem in terms of decision about growing crops. So those are the kind of constraints, and I think we need to address some of these constraints, and probably government has done a lot in the last few years. If I look at the price side, you know that price is the most important indicator for the farmers. And if we are able to provide the remunerative prices to the farmers and assured marketing, I'm sure the Indian farmers would be able to respond to any kind of a signal. And that we have seen in the last 15, 20 years. Because our composition of our agriculture is moving towards a high value segment, be it your horticulture sector, livestock, fisheries, or processed food sector, because the demand centers are moving in that direction. So given the kind of your technological and institutional constraints, farmers would like to respond to the market signals. And if you look at last 4 years between 2014 and 2014-15 and 2017-18, there's been very, very significant increase in the minimum support prices of almost all pulses crops. For example, in case of gram, our MSP has increased from 3,175 rupees per quintal to 4,400 rupees per quintal, which is about 40% increase. Similarly, in case of lentils, during last 4 years, you would find MSP has been increased by about 38, 39%, and almost 25 to 30% increase in other pulses crops like tur, moong, and urad. But that's the one side of the story. We also need to have very strong mechanism in terms of ensuring that the farmers get these prices. And unfortunately, during last season and even this year, we are experiencing depressed prices in the market. And today, the market prices of most of our pulses are much below even MSP. For example, if you look at this Kharif season, the average price during this season was about 4,300 rupees or to 4,500 rupees per quintal in case of moong, whereas our MSP was 5,575. Similarly, in case of fodder, you will find as against the minimum support price of 5,400 rupees per quintal, the prices were in the range of about 3,600 to 3,700. And there have been several factors which have contributed to this depressed prices. One of the reasons was that you know that in 2016-17, we had a record production of close to 23 million tons of pulses. On the top of that, we also imported close to more than 6.5 million tons of pulses. So that means your total supply available was in the range of about 29 to 30 million tons, which was much higher than our domestic demand. So when your supply is more than demand, it's going to have adverse impact on the prices. And again, in 2017-18, we are expecting almost the same level of production of pulses. But again, unfortunately, during April 2017 to November 2017, that's about your 7 to 8 months time, we again imported about 4.7 million tons of pulses. So on one hand, we are saying that we must promote our domestic production, but if farmers are not able to get the remunerative prices, the chances of shifting away from pulses to some other alternative crop which are more profitable, less risky, the chances are high that the farmers would shift to those crops. So what's the way out? So one is, you know, that the government also got into the market and procured a significant amount of pulses during last year, close to 2 million tons. But again, the problem is that we don't have the permanent kind of a outlet for disposing of those pulses. For example, rice and wheat, we have public distribution system, so you procure it and distribute it through public distribution system. But in case of pulses, one is you don't have a short market outlet. Second is the shelf life of most of the pulses is very short. And that brings us to the issue of what the earlier speaker was talking about, more investment in infrastructure and warehousing. Can we have a major technological kind of intervention through which we can extend the shelf life of our pulses through better storage facilities? So that's one area where we need to work so that it doesn't create a kind of a adverse impact in the market. Second is, you know, in order to protect our domestic farmers, you know that the government also imposed import duties and also opened the window of export opportunities. But we need to have a fairly predictable trade policy as an importer or as an exporter. But it's for sure that we must protect our efficient producers because the global markets in terms of agriculture are not perfectly competitive markets because there are distortions across the globe. I'm not talking about any individual country. But I think we must promote efficiency and we must promote healthy competition in the markets. So in order to address these issues, I think we need to work on three important areas. One is we need to reduce our cost of cultivation in case of pulses. And you know that pulses are labor-intensive crops, and particularly on the harvesting and threshing side. And you know that in India, labor availability and the cost of human labor is becoming an issue in case of agriculture, making agriculture less competitive. So that means we need to come up with the farm mechanization in a big way where we can mechanize some of these operations where we can reduce the cost of cultivation. So that's one area where we need to work on. Second is we need to focus on improving productivity. And you know that our Honorable Prime Minister has given a very challenging task to all of us, including industry, that we must double our farmers' income by 2022. And I think that has changed the overall scenario of our country, that has changed the basic approach towards agriculture. Earlier, we used to talk about production targets in terms of food grains or pulses or cereals or any other crop, and if we are able to achieve those targets, we were very happy with that. But we never looked at what cost we are producing those crops or commodities. So I think now our focus is that how much money gets into the pocket of the farmer. So it's not only the issue of price. If you increase your prices by, let's say, 5% or 10%, and if your costs are increasing by 15%, that means there's little gain to the farmer. So I think that's the area where we need to work in terms of ensuring that more money gets into the pockets of our farmers. And as I said, we need to work on reducing cost of cultivation. We need to improve productivity. And then on the top of that, we must ensure remunerative and assured prices to the farmers. And if that happens, I think we would be able to achieve this ambitious target of doubling farmers' income by 2022. And in order to look at this sector, I think we need to work on 4 basic pillars of your agriculture development, be it your pulses or grains or commercial crops. And the first pillar is on the technology front. So we must have right kind of technologies in terms of ensuring quality, disease-resistant or insect pest-resistant varieties. That's on the production side. So that means our R&D system should be geared toward that in terms of achieving that stated objective. Similarly, in case of processing, as I said, that most of the pulses have short shelf life. Second is the processing sector is more fragmented, it's unorganized, and in certain cases you have economies of scale in processing. So we need to have a strong intervention in terms of technology on the processing sector. I'm not talking about very large scale processing facilities because our farmers are small, and maybe if we are able to create some technologies where we can get into some value addition or some processing at the farm level and linking it to the market. So I think we need to really work on those issues in terms of technology. The second important pillar is in terms of infrastructure development. And I'll talk about 2 sides of infrastructure. One is which is more important in terms of making our farmers more profitable. Today the problem is that even if you have the MSP system in place or procurement system in place, the large number of farmers are still small and marginal farmers, have very less produce, which are like your marketed surplus. So how do we link these producers with the market so that they take advantage of either MSP operations or the market operations? So that means we need to create strong linkages in terms of creating these market infrastructure, not typically by the public sector. Public sector has a strong presence in market infrastructure, but we would like to have more private sector participation, corporate sector participation in development of market infrastructure and processing infrastructure in agri-value chains, including your pulses. So that's one area on the infrastructure side. And third one is, I think we need to strengthen our institutional mechanisms. As I said, these crops are little risky crops and more prone to diseases, more prone to your insect pest and other biotic and abiotic stresses. So our extension system has to be very, very effective in terms of communicating with the farmers in terms of what kind of management practices need to be followed. So that means we need to strengthen our agriculture extension system, and now with the changing time, we can use information and communication technology in a big way in terms of providing various types of information or package of practices to the farmers. Another issue in terms of institutions is, that most of the small and marginal farmers and the tenant farmers have low access to your institutional credit, because the systems are so cumbersome. In fact, now there is a much more focus in terms of financial inclusion, and Jan Dhan was one of the instruments where we could at least create some impact. But I think we need to make sure that our farmers get institutional finance at nominal interest rate So how do we make it sure that they have easy access to your institutional finance? So we need to work on strengthening institutions dealing with your rural credit. Similarly, you can talk about, let's say we are talking about this Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana. And that's going to be a game changer in terms of addressing the production risk, because these crops are much more risky. So by paying a little amount of my premium, if my production risks are covered, I think that's going to really motivate farmers to get into production of your pulses. And the fourth pillar, which I'm going to talk about, is the right kind of incentive structures. If the farmers get the right incentive, right price, they would respond to the market signals. And when I'm talking about the incentive structure, I think there are 2 or 3 elements. One is what we have in terms of minimum support price policy. The second is we need to have an appropriate trade policy which is in sync with what we want to achieve. So our trade policy has to be more proactive in terms of protecting the interest of the farmers to a large extent, and also encourage our farmers to take advantage of the world markets if there are export opportunities. So along with our support prices, right kind of a trade policy, and then improving terms of trade in favor of agriculture. So these are the 3 areas where we need to work. And these 4 pillars are, they are in place, but I think they are little more in terms of silos. So what the technology people are doing has no linkage with what the institutions are doing or what the infrastructure pillar is doing. So I think we need to strengthen these 4 pillars of technology, infrastructure, institution, and incentives, and make these more porous in terms of cross-learning from technology guide, from the incentive structure or incentive guide to infrastructure or institutional strengthening. And if we are able to work on these 4 pillars, I think we would be able to achieve the stated objective of doubling farmers' income. And I see a great role for the private sector because you all belong to the pulses sector. And let me tell you that the demand is going to be a major driver, and this is one area where demand is going to be significantly higher than what you produce. So how can we contribute as a society for the welfare of the farmers through technological interventions, through market interventions, or any other kind of support? So with these words, I thank once again the organizers for providing this opportunity. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. That was the chair. Sir, may I request you please wait a moment? Professor, thank you. May I please request the Joint Secretary, Mr. Vasant Banoshalit, please step up on stage and present a memento. Ladies and big round of applause. This is the Chair, Commission for Agricultural Costs and Prices, Government of India, Professor Vijay Paul Sharma. Mr. Banoshalit, please.